So the mind-body problem, the phrase is pretty recent. It goes back to 19th century German philosophy. It was coined in the early 19th century and then became, it was useful to philosophers and scientists who were trying to understand the link between matter and mind. So how is it that a clump of stuff, the human brain, can give rise to perception, to memory, to understanding, to emotions, to the whole mental realm. And that set of questions actually goes back millennia. Socrates talked about it, and I think it probably goes back to, I don't know, to the first really sentient humans or quasi-humans who were just questioning their own existence and wondering what they really are. I think another way of expressing the mind-body problem is it's the question of what we really are. Are we really matter? Are we spirit? Are we computer programs? Are we some kind of byproduct of the collapse of the quantum wave function? There have been all these answers to the mind-body problem throughout history, coming both from religion, and I think religion was originally the source of popular answers to the mind-body question. So I grew up Catholic, and the answer was that we're souls created by God, and if we do certain things correctly that God wants us to do, we get to go to heaven. So that's great. And there are different religious versions of that. The philosophers had that their own set of answers. And of course, in our era, over the last couple of centuries, we look to science for answers to these kinds of questions about what we really are. And the answers tend to be, especially over the last, 50 years or so, very materialistic. We're going to explain consciousness, mental states generally, in the same way that we explain all natural phenomena in terms of physical processes. And so I've been obsessed with the mind-body problem actually since I was a little kid, because I've always been tormented by these questions about, what is the world and what am I? I'm like the weirdest thing in the world. What the hell is going on here? And I went through a period when I actually thought there would be an answer to that question. And I thought, going back to the 90s, I was really writing a lot about consciousness. I thought it might be something materialistic. Francis Crick, the great co-discoverer of the double helix, he had a set of ideas about explaining consciousness in terms of neuroscience. I thought that was a sensible program for approaching the mind-body problem as a problem of primarily neuroscience, but then chemistry and physics below that. And over the last, decade or so, I just no longer believe that there is an answer to the mind-body problem. An answer, a single answer. And I think actually it's been a terrible mistake for humans to think that there is one answer that applies to everybody and all humans at all times. And it's a mistake not only kind of from a scientific point of view, it's a moral and ethical mistake because it has led historically, the idea that there is just one answer, to oppression and genocide and wars. We fight over our different ideas about what we really are. And so I wrote Mind-Body Problems to kind of flesh out this growing intuition that I've had that, I guess if you take this idea that there isn't a single answer to its extreme, you reach a conclusion that every single individual has to find his or her own answer to the mind-body problem. And that you can change your mind. You know, the answer that you come up with now might not be the answer that you come up with a month from now or a year from now. My ideas. So that's what.
I think you're right as well to be sensitive to the way that in the kind of human context in which these things come along, the way that they can be abused, right? Like Darwinian evolution, to me, it's almost like a statistical thing. It's a really fascinating, quite a psychedelic like image of forms changing generation after generation, and through cooperation they kind of morph and become different things. Yet that's one story you can tell, but then as we've seen in the 20th century, a lot of people took kind of this neo-Darwinian idea of kind of fascism being good because it's a survival of the fittest, and just one way of telling one aspect of the story of evolution, which I take to be true about us. But I totally get what you mean. It kind of even if there are objective answers, they inevitably get kind of messed with in this kind of because everyone comes to them with this kind of subjective lens, right?
Right, and it's understandable that, I mean, we're all confused. Well, most of us, you know, the sort of the class of people who even care about these sort of things, we're confused by existence and by our own existence, and so we're desperate for answers, and the problem is that we should never think. I think we need to honor that sense of curiosity and follow it wherever it takes us, but never think that we have the answer. Once we think that we've satisfied this craving or this yearning we have, that can make us dangerous people. It can turn us into fanatics, and this happens most obviously in the realm of religion, but it also happens with scientific or pseudoscientific, quasi-scientific theories, like, as you mentioned, evolutionary biology, which led to social Darwinism. I'd put Marxism in the category of a kind of totalitarian ideology that led to fanaticism and lots of bad things happening. Eugenics, obviously, and even things like, I don't know, the modern idea that mental illness just is a result of chemical malfunctions in the brain, and therefore we need to medicate ourselves out of this problem. So I guess what I'm looking for is, I still think science is our most powerful way of understanding ourselves in the world. But we need to be more humble about what science can tell us about ourselves. More humble and
I
more
think
modest.
mainstream science suffers from that kind of issue. You know, you mentioned kind of mental health, right? Like, I think whenever there's a kind of dominant culture and systems of power, the story that gets told is always the story that's most convenient to whatever the system is. And so, seeing science from the inside, I came into it with this very idealistic, the feeling that it's a kind of pure tool that can just kind of cut truth out of the world. And then I still think it's wonderful, but then I came to realize it's a very powerful tool that's wielded by fallible humans who are trying to make a career, and everything gets kind of funneled through all of these basic kind of unconscious human emotional drives. So I think if you, in anything less than a kind of perfectly equal society, if anyone has the kind of narrative of this is how you are supposed to be a human, this is the correct way to think about what you are and what it means to be a human, I think that's, I can see why that's a very dangerous idea.